The Small Key by Paz Latorena. It was very warm, the sun up above a sky that was blue and tremendous, and beckoning to birds ever on the wing, shone brightly as if determined to scorch everything under heaven. Even the low, square nipa house that stood in an unashamed relief against the gray-green haze of grass and leaves. It was a lonely dwelling located far from its neighbors, which were huddled close to one another as if for mutual comfort. It was flanked on both sides by tall, slender bamboo trees which rustled plaintively under a gentle wind. On the porch, a woman past her early 20s stood regarding the scene before her, with eyes made curious by its familiarity. All around her the land stretched endlessly. It seemed and vanished into the distance. There were dark, newly plowed furrows where in due time timorous seedlings would give rise to sturdy stalks and golden grain, to a rippling yellow sea in the wind and sun during harvest time, the promise of plenty and reward for hard toil. With a sigh of discontent, however, the woman turned and entered the small dining room where a man sat over a belated midday meal. Pedro Buhay, a prosperous farmer, looked up from his plate and smiled at his wife as she stood framed by the doorway, the sunlight glinting on her dark hair which was drawn back without a relenting wave from a rather prominent and austere brow.
Where are the shirts I ironed yesterday?
In my trunk, I think.
Some of them need darning. Do you want some more rice?
No, I'm in a hurry to get back. We must finish plowing this outfield today because tomorrow is a Sunday. Here, it's the key to my trunk.
With deliberate care, he untied the knot and, detaching the big key, dropped the small one back into his pocket. She watched him fixedly as he did this. The smile left her face and a strange look came into her eyes as she took the big key from him without a word. Together they left the dining room.
Are you alright? You look pale and tired. What have you been doing all morning?
Nothing, but the heat gives me a headache.
Hush. Then lie down and try to sleep while I'm gone.
For a moment they looked deep into each other's eyes.
It is really warm. I'll take my coat off.
Let me take that.
Thank you. Also, Colin, I'll pass by Tia Maria's house and tell her to come here. I may not return before dark, so
Alright, take care.
goodbye.
Soledad's eyes followed her husband down the road, noting the fine set of his head and shoulders, the case of his stride. A strange ache rose in her throat. She looked at the coat he had handed to her. It exuded the faint smell of his favorite cigars, one of which he invariably smoked after the day's work on his way home from the fields.
It's Pedro. What's this? Oh my, it's the key.
She then went inside their bedroom, quickly throwing Pedro's coat over a chair. She then opened the window and began to feel the breeze as it enters the room. She began folding the clothing one by one in a feverish haste, as if seeking the task of the moment in refuge from painful thoughts. But her eyes moved restlessly around the room until they rested almost furtively on a small trunk that was half concealed by a rolled mat in a dark corner. It was a small old trunk, without anything on the outside that might arouse one's curiosity, but it held the things she had come to hate with unreasonable violence, the things that were causing her so much unnecessary anguish and pain, and threatened to destroy all that was most beautiful between her and her husband. Soledad came across a torn garment. She threaded a needle, but after a few uneven stitches, she pricked her finger, and a crimson drop stained the white garment. Then she saw she had been mending on the wrong side.
Gods, what is the matter with me?
She asked herself aloud as she pulled the thread with nervous and impatient fingers.
What did it matter if my husband chose to keep the clothes of his first wife? She's dead anyhow. She's dead. Dead under the ground.
The sound of her own voice calmed her. She tried to thread the needle once more, but she could not. Not for the tears that had come unbidden and completely blinded her.
My God, make me forget Pedro's face.
She brushed her tears with the sleeves of her camisa and abruptly stood up. The heat was stifling, and the silence in the house was beginning to be unendurable. She looked out the window. She wondered what was keeping Tia Maria.
Did Pedro forget to pass by Tia Maria?
She could picture him out there in the south field gazing far and wide at the newly plowed land with no thought in his mind but of work. For the two people, the barrio whose patron saint, San Isidro Labrador, smiled at them with benign eyes from his crude altar in the little chapel up the hill. This season was a prolonged hour during which they were blind and dead to everything but the demands of the land. During the next half hour, Soledad wandered in and out of the rooms in an effort to seek escape from her own thoughts and to fight down an overpowering impulse. If Tia Maria would only come and talk to her to divert her thoughts to other channels. But the expression on her husband's face as he put the small key back into his pocket kept torturing her like a nightmare.
I can't take this anymore.
Goading beyond endurance, then with all resistance to impulse gone, she was kneeling before the small trunk. With a long-drawn breath, she inserted the small key. That evening, Pedro Buhay hurried home with the usual cigar dangling from his mouth, pleased with himself and the tenants because the work in the south field had been finished.
Pedro, you're back. Please hurry inside.
Tia Maria? What? Why? What happened? Where's Colin?
She's in here. She's sick.
She's burning up. I'll go to town and bring Dr. Santos.
Soledad opened her eyes.
Don't, Pedro. The town's far, and it's already dark, so please don't. I'll be all right tomorrow.
Shh. No. I'll come back. Don't worry.
Pedro.
Pedro returned an hour later, very tired and very worried. The doctor was not at home, but his wife had promised to give him Pedro's message as soon as he came in.
I'll stay here for the time being.
Tia Maria decides to remain the night, but it was Pedro who stayed up to watch the sick woman. He was puzzled and worried, more than he cared to admit it. Soledad was restless the whole night. She tossed from one side to another, but toward morning she fell into some sort of troubled sleep. Pedro then lay down to snatch a few winks. He woke up to find the soft morning sunshine streaming through the half-open window. He got up without making any noise. His wife was still asleep and now breathing evenly. A sudden rush of tenderness came over him at the sight of her, so slight, so frail. Tia Maria was nowhere to be seen, but that did not bother him, for it was a Sunday and the work in the south field was finished. However, he missed the pleasant aroma which came from the kitchen every time he had awakened early in the morning. The kitchen was neat but cheerless, and an immediate search for wood brought no results, so shouldering an axe, Pedro went down the rickety stairs that led to the backyard. The morning was clear and the breeze was soft and cool. Pedro took in a deep breath of air, and it was good. It smelled of trees, of the rice fields, of the land that he loved. He found a pile of logs under the young mango tree near the house and began to chop. He swung the axe with rapid, clean sweeps, enjoying the feel of the smooth wooden handle in his palms. As he stopped for a while to mop his brow, his eyes caught the remnants of a smudge that had been built in the backyard.
Ah, she swept the yard yesterday after I left her. That, and coupled with the heat, must have given her a headache and then the fever. What's that? Burnt cloves?
It was a half-burned panuelo. Somebody had been burning clothes. He examined the slightly ruined garment closely. A puzzled expression came into his eyes. First it was doubt groping for truth, then amazement, and finally agonized disbelief passed across his face.
Oh no.
He ran back into the house. In 3 strides he was upstairs. He found his coat hanging from the back of a chair. Cautiously, he entered the room. The heavy breathing of his wife told him that she was still asleep. As he stood by the small trunk, a vague distaste to open it assailed him.
No, I must be mistaken. She could not have done it. She could not have been that foolish.
Resolutely, he opened the trunk.
It's empty.
It was nearly noon when the doctor arrived. Pedro stood by listening to the whole procedure with an inscrutable expression on his face. When the doctor told him that there was really nothing wrong with his wife, although she seemed to be worried about something, the physician merely prescribed a day of complete rest.
All right. Thank you, doctor.
He said. Pedro lingered on the porch after the doctor left. He was trying not to be angry with his wife. He hoped it would just be an interlude that could be recalled without bitterness. She would explain sooner or later. She would be repentant. Perhaps she would even listen and eventually forgive her. For she was young and he loved her. But somehow he knew that this incident would always remain a shadow in their lives.